might wonder how I ended up in here. Today, we are going to beat Gran Turismo's professional events with only a Dodge Charger. To see how difficult this could become, into the world of Gran Turismo, we go! This time, we will start with something big, the Supercar Festival. At Seoul Central, after the rest of the grid was through, I kept my pace, pushed the Charger to its limits, and pulled myself close towards the Volkswagen. And right before the roundabout, Leonardo could no longer hold me back. I went from the outside and overtook him, earning myself first place in the middling point of this race. Well, that one was easy. I was expecting more. Oh well, moving on. Yo, look it! It's an Apple baby. How's the concept car doing, bro?
Oh, haha, funny. Look, there's this guy in a blue Charger. I thought he was a joke entry, but he beat us all.
No way! You must have sucked so bad to let some guy in an old janky brick do that, bro.
Well then, why don't you take him? See him for yourself.
He's tripping, Vam. Let me at it. And you better watch. I'll show you how to drive for real.
The next race was held at the Fuji Speedway. As I have a little to no idea on how to launch this thing properly, I kind of struggled on the start. But on the first hairpin, I've caught up and took on the bottom feeders as soon as possible, so I can start gunning for the heavy hitters in this race. I tailed the Ford GT throughout the hairpin and nailed P2 as soon as possible. Right after the chicane, I had finally caught up with the Zonda. Unfortunately, the car seemed to understeer on the latter part of the corner, and as a result, I touched grass and the Zonda slipped away. I got myself back together and went through the Panasonic curve while keeping a smooth drive, but all that progress was halted by the stalemate we had on the straights. On the corner, thanks to precise braking and correct line decisions, I have finally overtaken the Zonda, breaking the status quo from the straights.
Ah, damn, how could this happen to me? We got a problem, fam. Nebo baby was serious.
Don't tell me you got your ass beat by this guy, bro. Damn it, bro. I'll drive in the next race. Looks like all y'all need Racing School 101.
Since I was very far ahead in this race, even faffing about in the final lap didn't threaten my victory at all. Meanwhile, in New York's race...
So you're the brick rider my bros were talking about.
The brick what now?
Doesn't matter.
What does is how badly I'ma beat your ass. Well, that was weird. Anyways, right after the straights, the rare Zeta was found dead on the guardrail, seemingly suffering from complete inability to make a turn. As for me, that was an easy climb. By the first checkpoint on the third lap, I was right behind the Ford. Unfortunately, this achievement had led to overzealousness, and as a result, I followed the GT right to the walls. Across the technical section, I closely followed the Ford, refusing to ever let him go no matter what. As for the final long straights of the lap, I kept the pressure up, but this time, I remembered to brake in time for the hairpin, which the Ford had missed. So, with better speeds of the corner, I had finally managed to score the overtake against the mid-engine supercar. But that was not the end of our story. On the end of the straight section, the Ford braked too late, bumped pretty hard against the wall, but this somehow had allowed him to gain ground against me, defying all logic. Of course, I retaliated, which had led to a fierce dogfight for gold. The Ford GT with his upper hand came from what seemed to be a mistake against me and my Charger, who had to regain our position no matter what. At the end of this section, I took the wrong lane and was punted to the walls, giving the Ford the victory for now.
Dumbass!
He might have won the battle, but we are still at war. I'm close, and I have zero intentions on giving up. I pushed through, kept the Ford close throughout the straights, and once again, we've arrived at the hairpin. This time, I got the better lane and made my overtake. While it seemed to be a repeat from the previous lap, this time, I braked early so I could exit fast from the corner. And would you look at that, the red Ford crashed into the walls, while I get to free myself from the sharp turn faster. By keeping myself close to the curbs throughout the roundabout, I ensured the Charger traveled less distances while not losing a lot of speed, which helped in creating a personal best in this race. And in the end, I got the third victory in the festival.
You got lucky. You hear me?
All you got was luck. In midfield raceway, Leonardo seemed to dominate, but kept on applying consistent pressure throughout the straights, and on the 10th corner, I took advantage of the concept car's mistake and made a double overtake, landing myself in the podium. As the S7 was struggling through the deceptively dangerous curve, I made my way smoothly and cemented my spot on second place. Then, it was time to hunt down the Red 4 GT, which was quite dominant in the race. While he seemed to escape on the straights, I managed to reel him back through sheer superiority in cornering, and then, the difference in our skill kept sucking him in like a black hole until I could finally make the overtake. Imagine being out-cornered by a brick! You think I was being serious? I was going easy on you, bro. Whatever helps you sleep at night, bro. So, with the Ford GT overtaken, came the task to defend the position. I carefully went past the 6th corner, choosing precision over brute force. With the tires on the optimal temperature, I could bring all of the Charger's potential here. With this buffer, I could experiment a bit on my aggressiveness, which I immediately do on the 9th corner. Sure, I might have been too wide, but I think it's better, as this is still a high-speed corner. With how the last couple of corners are positioned, I took a wide line and combined both corners, promoting smoothness and speed to ensure a pace faster than the rest of the grid. The 4 GT remained close, but that was not fast enough to turn the tables, so I achieved yet another victory. And once I had won the Infineon Raceway, well, that's that. The Supercar Festival won with a non-maxed out Dodge Charger. And for my efforts, I was awarded the R390 road car, known for its high downforce and is surprisingly powered by a V8. I might find use for this car yet. So, what's next? I ventured to the Clubman Cup, which was easy. There's the race of NA Sports, where an M3 was showing quite a promise in the Apricot Hill Raceway. We were engaged in quite a duel for the win there, and he actually won that duel. While I reclaimed my post on the second lap, the M3 didn't let me go scot-free. We were still bumper to bumper throughout the S's. Well, once I was done with the hairpin, the M3 could no longer keep up, and then the race of NA Sports was won. So, with that done, the next up would be the World Classics. The fastest possible opponent here will be the Buick Special. Yet I got a feeling that this is where I will taste true failure.
You okay, fam? He thinks he can just beat me in that break? I'll show him! I'll show that smug bastard who runs the show around here! Don't do it, fam. What if you crash? Keep this for the extreme events, man. This is extreme. You think me, being in a Ford GT, being beat by a piece of museum junk is an extreme? Look, I lost too, and I'm pissed. But if anything happens to the car now, we're cooked. Out of my way, bro. I got no time for what ifs.
Welcome to World Classics Hard Mode, featuring all your worst nightmares. The first round was set in Fuji Speedway, where speed matters the most. Right before the first corner, I slid past the Shelby and made quick work of its British variant before the corner ended. Then, there is nothing stopping me from hunting both the Buick and the Ford down. On the hairpin, I made contact with the Special and dueled it throughout the 300R. With better speeds, I managed to make a clean overtake and put myself in P2. The challenge now was to defeat the Ford GT40. How is your car allowed, by the way? Thought this race for production cars only.
Technically, every car old enough can enter. You just need a set of sports tires for it. Too bad you're stuck with that brick now, huh?
I tried my best on the straights, but the Charger was utterly beaten in the speed department. Not only that, it turned out that the airport long straights was also the home of the Buick Special, which managed to retake P2. So, on the hairpin, I acted quickly and seized my silver medal back before he could escape. On the 100R, I was forced to slow down more than I would like to avoid eating grass like the race car before me, which had prevented me from taking advantage of that rare choke. To make things worse, on the 300R, the Ford managed to somehow up his pace and increased his advantage. Predictably, there was no hope left on the straights, and I had to be happy with P2, trailing 4 points behind the Ford GT40. How'd you like that? I told you, you were lucky! In El Capitan, as soon as the Charger went through the motions, it was unleashed. Like before, the 300 SL went down first. Then, the Shelby was unable to compete against me in this treacherous track. Its British brother might have fared a bit better, but still, compared to my Charger, he was also nothing. Even this time, the Buick Special was shoved off P2 right around the 7th corner. I wasted no time. I went right in and attacked the race on the first possible opportunity. Before turn 8, I was leading the pack. However, my fight did not stop there, as after reaching P1 came the responsibility of holding onto it as best as I can. On the steep uphill part, I slowed the Charger down and kept it close to the cliff walls. I remained vigilant and dropped my pace to prevent the car from going wild and spinning out. With how uneven these altitudes are, I cannot afford to take daring risks. Despite this tiptoe level pace, I was still a second ahead of the race car, which gave me quite the peace of mind needed to take on the final corner smoothly. As a result from this careful driving, I managed to reach the final lap 3 seconds earlier than my biggest rival. Sure, this advantage was mostly dashed away on the 6th corner, but I remained calm and calculated throughout the bends this mountainous course has in store. By the first checkpoint, I was just a second ahead of the Ford GT40. I didn't let this intimidate me and kept my head cool throughout this precarious layout. By corner 12, I tried to up my pace just a bit, see if the Charger could handle it. At this point, the Buick had somehow overtaken the race car, and I had to deal with his advances on the final corner. I knew he'll try to take the inner lane, so I went ahead and took that lane for myself. After a successful defense, I launched off, put the hammer down and flew towards the finish line. I refused to let my one chance to score a win taken away, and so I managed to reach the finish line before the Buick could slingshot past, giving me 10 whole points and a pole position in the championship as the Ford had placed in 3rd. The 3rd round of this race was set in the rather infamous Nürburgring. Right off the bat, I took the Mercedes out of relevancy. I got no time to waste. Both the Buick and the GT40 were bound to be worlds ahead by now just from the starting from pole positions. I tailed the AC all the way to the Hudson-Bach and immediately made my move before he could pull any defensive maneuvers against me. Time, after all, was ticking. I immediately hunted the Cobra down. With each corner, I became closer towards the Shelby and made that quick overtake, vaulting over the last rolling roadblock towards my real targets. However, what I had forgotten was the fact that Nürburgring is a massive track. It had everything from twisty technical sections which demand all of your attention, skill, and track knowledge towards long straights that test both your car's power and your bravery. In these fast sections, I was once again reminded of the Charger's ironic lack of speed compared to the two monsters before me, but I persevered. After all, preservation has yet to fail me so far. I made my way throughout to Ehrenberg as fast as I could. Once that hairpin was through, I went all in, putting my money where my mouth is and held onto the car as hard as I could. I was barely halfway throughout Nürburgring, and already my nitrous was already most empty. This round has exposed both driver and car. I was disgustingly outmatched, and that was not taking the Dottinger Hohe Straits yet, in where I was lagging behind by 14 whole seconds. Well then, that was that. Apparently, I was not ready for the green hell yet. With this placement, I was tied with the Ford GT40. Next round was set in Monaco. This time, I absolutely refused to accept anything less than P1. Literally can't. I have to win this. So, I went to work, especially seeing how the usual suspects are already fleeing the scene. It was just the first checkpoint on the first lap, and already the race car is 5 seconds ahead. So, after the AC was dealt with, I took on the inner lane and made my way to P3 through a proper racing line. Despite all this, I was still bumping around Monaco's tight roads. The chicane managed to slow both race leaders down enough for me to catch up, but this frantic driving had led towards a rather suboptimal run, allowing both the Ford and the Buick to keep on leading unchallenged. So, I calmed myself and entered the second lap with a clear head. On the hairpin, I've got real close towards the both of them. I seized the Buick's place and acted quick enough to take care of the race car before he could escape. After the chicane, I managed to create an instant gap against my rival, and all I had to do from this point on was to drive carefully, as the odds of any of them overtaking me in these conditions were low. And just like that, I managed to score a victory in Monaco, breaking free from the status quo. But with only 4 more points compared to the race car, I will still need to win the last race to win this tournament. The last round was set in Laguna Seca. I reached P4 the Andretti hairpin with relative ease as I had the better handling compared to the both of them. Things seemed to be dicey for now, but I knew this track better. On the corkscrew, I managed to cut some of the gap off, giving me better grounds to win that championship. I chased down the Buick through the rainy curve all the way to the final corner, and finally managed to reach P2 just before the first lap had ended. On the first checkpoint, I knew I had to increase my pace to win the tournament. So, on the fifth corner, I yanked the steering wheel as hard as I can, while relying on throttle control to prevent the car from going off track. While the Ford gained grounds in Rahal Straight, it turned out to be a huge mistake, as on the corkscrew, I managed to get a better line and, for the most part, stuck to the asphalt, while the Ford went to the sands in frenzy. I made to overtake and fled the Ford before he could retaliate. On the final straight, I hammered down, and we gave it our all in one final push to win the tournament. Finally, the final victory of the tournament, which had also sealed the deal. The professional Hall had thrown the Dodge Charger through quite the ringer, though in this case, I did a few adjustments in the World Classics to make it actually challenging. Though, what surprised me more was how the Buick Special could beat a full-on race car at times during that championship. Honestly, that was insane to see. Well, despite everything, you did well in playing the loophole. Kinda reminds me of Gran Turismo 2.
This ain't over. No matter what car you use next, I'll be there to whoop your ass.
If you like this video, check out the time I tried beating the game with V8 cars, or the time I tried beating the game while an AI takes over for every other event. Or if you're interested in what I do, check out the channel. You'll like it.